Okay, good afternoon. I am Anto Budiojo, and welcome to Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon as we try and figure out the future for smarter buildings in this very uncertain world that we live in. So, in case you're wondering who we are on this panel, our profiles are listed on mondaylive.org, so head over there. And just to remind everybody that views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. So this is the sort of the core rule of this gathering. And let us make this as interactive as possible with comments and chit chat on the Zoom chat. So looking forward to that. And if you want anything from this slide deck, it's also available on the homepage of mondaylive.org. So this being the first Monday in March of 2026, we are starting a new theme for the month of March, and the theme is on the topic of governance, and we think it's an important subject for us to talk about at this sort of point in time. So we'll see how it goes. Governance is not most times not the most exciting topic, but it is a very important topic in what we're going through. So looking forward to that. So in terms of our agenda, normal news and trends, and we'll talk about governance. And today we're really going to be talking about what are we talking about being governed? You know, what is being governed? What is not being governed? You know, that sort of dimension of it. What's this all about, and why should we care? And hopefully we'll have some good discussion around that. But before, as always, I'm going to hand it over to Ken Sinclair for updates from automated buildings. Ken, over to you.
Okay, thanks. Lots going on. I gave my take on governance. Oversees the control and directional influence flows to those who build, test, and implement the duocracy. And I think in my mind, that's the direction that we can look at going. Is in the duocracy, we're giving the power to the people who actually are doing and building the change that we envision. And I believe that if within their definitions, they need to include their own governance if they feel they need governance, or be very clear about the fact that they do not need governance. I think all of those are possibilities. The other thing we're starting to see interaction of a lot of the members of Monday Live, C4SB, and they're reorganizing themselves depending on what it is they're doing into teams quickly in their, what I'm entitling their duocracies, whether that's going to conventions or going to other events, or whether it's actually on a project or and I think that's the kind of flexibility that we need in all of this openness, is sort of a movement forward. The duocracy one there, if you click on that, that gives you a summary of last week's thing, which is from bureaucracy to duocracy. Why building beats persuading, in the smart buildings. And I think that's true. We can talk till we're blue in the face to try and convince some people, but if we just simply show them what it is we're talking about, it's like they have that aha moment. I'm talking about the aha moment. The next one, the proof is in the ice cream. This is a great one put together by Keith and Kimon. And what fascinated me was the ability that they could actually build a virtual BIM model in midair and very quickly. And then they were able to actually put real-time data into that. So it basically just unravels a whole bunch of reasons why we can't do what we wanted to do. An excellent read and some comments there. Below that, our newest contributing editor, Jeffrey, as Atmosphere continues, what he's seeing is that we need to record a lot of this information so we can validate our buildings. And I think that piece is going to slide into governance. If you actually click on that one, it actually takes you to a lot of his with his posts, and you can kind of get the gist of what he's talking about. In the center of the screen, we have our take on the software wars that went on in Vegas. Basically, Kimon had done a summary of that last week. This is the actual recording from our automated building sessions. I still think it's an important piece, and so we represented it again. Below that, we're starting to work through the video that we've captured and add to it AI summaries, so you don't have to watch 16 hours of video. We'll give you a summary, and then when you read the summary, you might want to watch the real video. The one below is the one that Brad and Jacob did from Cochrane, and they give us some real examples of trying to use AI and where it fell apart and where it was brilliant and where there's still opportunities to use it. So that's a good read as well. We have all of our sessions online now. If you just click on that one and you click on the last one, it actually gives you a summary. If you actually click on the first part of the article, it takes you right to our actual programs and gives you the explanation of who's speaking and why they're speaking and what the theme of each session was. The one thing I'd like you to click on is my, if you follow me, which is that picture of me and just above there. Yeah. If you click on there, that as I'm trying to unravel the industry going 1,000 different directions at the same time, I've been typically posting posting and reposting a whole bunch of stuff. And there's some pretty interesting articles there, and they're getting some pretty good reads, 4 and 500,000 stuff like that. So it's an interesting discussion. I think that's part of what automatedbuildings.com is just trying to make sense of all of this and keep on top. And on that, back to you, Anto.
Thank you, Ken. So over to Rick.
Yeah, this is what we've got on the front page of our website, the C4SB website, still highlighting what happened at AHR and the summary that Kimon posted that was mentioned earlier. On the next slide, we show the working groups, and then go to the next slide, please. Look at that. I updated it with a imagine that. And it worked. So we've got the existing working groups that we're continuing to get more attention around, and then we're taking those working groups and looking at other topics that are of interest to the members and to the contributors, and the short list that we've got there is just an indication of some of the new things that are kind of popping up as either projects or working groups of their own. And the 231P has been getting a lot of attention, and that is probably going to be a project under the semantic buildings working group right there. UDMI being the Universal Device Management Interface that has been a lot of people are familiar with, and quite a few companies have actually already implemented that as either a project or a working group. Probably a working group because of the amount of people that are involved in that. If in fact it comes under C4SB, one way or another, we're going to highlight what UDMI can mean for the industry. Another focus that we've got is this OpenUSD. Now that's actually a project of the Linux Foundation, separate from C4SB, but we're thinking that there's an awful lot of application for this universal scene description concept inside of our industry, and trying to figure out how to weave that into what we're doing. Does it go under digital twins? Does it stand alone? And then the AV one maybe speaks for itself, is like the audiovisual systems in buildings are actually fairly important to a lot of building types, and how that intersects with OT and IT. is something that a lot of people have shown interest in. So what we're doing is, we're expanding from what we originally were focusing on back 4 years ago to a continuum of technologies. And then I put the PAE building in the bottom right there because we're really excited about how we can show the specific things that the working groups are, the projects and the code, the duocracy results, and how those different projects can actually be demonstrated on real live buildings, and the PAE building being one. But we want to continue to bring attention to places where these different open source and open standards based projects are actually taking root, because the PAE building is not the only place. It just happens to be one of the coolest places. So that's the update for C4SB. Reach out if you've got other questions, or raise your hand.
Thank you, Rick. What's interesting to me about OpenUSD is that that's a technology standard that really came from the gaming and the movie industry, right? So it's not something that is sort of engineering-ish, right? The way we think about it, it's a very different industry and highly relevant to what we are doing. So interesting angle there. Thank you. So I am bringing up this article on the Atlantic, and it's an article that I feel it's really worth reading. It's a long article, like everything in the Atlantic, but it really goes through the whole sort of scenario of what's going on right now, the impact that AI is having on jobs, and how the secondary and tertiary sort of impacts of all of that, and just sort of narrating the reality that certainly America, this is what it's focused on, isn't ready for what AI is going to do with all of this. Really, really worth reading. As I said, it's quite long. I love the graphics. This graphic's kind of interesting, but I also love this graphic here, because this is kind of, I think, the world that we live in. With AI, I feel very productive these days, but it seems like the world is falling apart around me, kind of thing. So interesting perspective. Suggest you read it. Other thoughts? I think, Kimon, and you're going to talk about the microgrid session.
Yeah, I can give a brief overview. In fact, the recording has been posted of the whole session. So if anybody's interested in listening to it, it was kind of well, first of all, PAE was there, Stephen Lothrop, and Tristan was there, and myself, and the three of us presented to the Microgrid Coalition. Stephen did a lot of the presentation because he's an engineer, talking to the engineers, so we gave him a lot of time to talk and discuss that. They were interested in scalability of the PAE solution, because they were talking about many buildings. So the question was, can we scale it? And the question of cybersecurity also came up, and AI. So it's kind of the similar themes of AI and governance and scalability. And one thing that to kind of work off the duocracy discussion too, I think it's so important even for governance, as we're going to talk about next too, is to be able to actually see things and touch it and try it. And then you can kind of get a sense of, okay, what are we really talking about here? Because there's a lot of theory about where it can go or what it should do. But at a certain point, if you don't sit down and do it, it just becomes kind of a lot of chatter, I think. And so that's kind of the angle that we presented to the Microgrid Coalition, that this is a real thing. These are not just slides. This actually happened. And it is scalable, I guess, is the main message. But we need more participation. There's a lot more to do, like we said, with the C4SB. So trying to welcome them all in.
Rick, do you have anything to add on that? Because I know you attended that.
I think if people get a chance to watch the recording, it's great. And I think there were so many little sound bites that came from what Stephen presented, what Tristan presented, what Kimon presented. One of my favorites was when Stephen said, because we can't get grid signals from the utility, we're sending signals to ourselves as to when to cut back on utilization inside the building, which kind of, I don't know, you'd have to watch the video to understand the context of that. But it was like, here we are with a building that could be more of a good citizen of the downtown community of Portland, with all the different technologies ready to be able to be a great microgrid participant, but the utility effectively is not participating. I know that's not fair to the utility because they are doing some really amazing things up there, but that was one of my key sound bites I liked, which we'll send the darn signals to ourselves.
Take over the signal. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Kimon, Rick.
I have
One
Any-
more.
one more that pop in. I posted something on universities. I'll dig it out and put it into chat. It's just talking about the radical change in the whole education system because of AI, because of the way AI reaches out and it teaches you, and it starts to decay the university culture, and it's sort of a double whammy for us because I think we all understand that learning will be different in the future. But the thing that immediately caught my mind is that a lot of the stock of very complex automated buildings is part of university campuses. And if in fact the article is true, which I actually believe it is, then what that suggests is that those buildings will have to be repurposed for some other use as the funding and stuff starts to decay for universities. So I thought that was kind of just an interesting, twist, which actually builds on your first Atlantic article there. I'll post it.
One more quick thing on news. I'm going back to the Scale 23X conference in Pasadena, which is an open source conference that they have a lot of discussions about open source AI as well too. So I'm trying to see what's new there. It's happening this week. I put a link into that.
Good. Maybe we can get a report from that.
Yeah.
Next week or after. Cool. Any other thoughts? Hearing none. So let us. I've been doing these sort of AI perspective slides just to keep us up to date with what's going on. This is really the slide that I found yesterday that is kind of interesting. This is the rate of growth of tokens. This is all about LLMs and obviously the big labs, big AI labs, and tokens across 2025. This is last year. So it went from just about 500 billion tokens a day, which is that, up to 6,000 billion. So that's 6 trillion tokens a day at the end of 25. That's kind of the increase of it. And this is the price that's been going down. So I think we would have expected this kind of chart, but it's just kind of interesting just to see it. And also the other part of it is that the light blue here are the free tokens versus the paid tokens, are the dark blue. So you can actually see that most of the tokens are not paid for, which is interesting in its own right. Any thoughts or comments on that?
Well, it reminds me when I go fishing, I got to throw some chum in the water to get things going. So, yeah, maybe they're just trying to stimulate the use of it to get more paid engagements, I guess.
Something like that. All right, so moving on to governance. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I think the focus of today really is what is governance? Why are we even talking about it? And specifically, why does it matter to this group, to Monday Live? We've been going for 6 years trying to figure out what smart building technology is all about. How does this play into that? So in sort of thinking about this in the last week, I came across this very interesting dilemma that this guy, David Collingridge, wrote about back in 1980. So 1980 is kind of important because it's kind of before the internet. So he was not aware of the internet and everything that's happened since. But he's obviously aware of this dilemma, which is actually very, very old. As per, I think last week I talked about my Plato article, which puts this back all the way to the ancient Greek times. But so this guy, Collingridge Dilemma, says that when technology is new, you don't really know what it's about. You don't know what the impact will be on the world, on itself, on other things, and you don't know what to do. You don't know how to govern that because there's not enough information about that, and there's also not enough information. There's hardly any information that you actually need to govern that new technology. Now, every new technology will go through this, and it's probably pretty clear to all of us that much of what we're talking about, stuff that's going on in C4SB, from IBB to PAE to all of the things, is basically in this mold right now, in this sort of side of the dilemma. There's a lot of innovation going on. There's a lot of creativity trying to figure it all out, and it's really, really not very easy to figure out where this is all going to go and how to govern it. The other side of this dilemma is that by the time the impacts become clear, years or decades later, because you have all the information, because you've had these years, the technology is so deeply embedded in how we do things that it is really, 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 really difficult or impossible to change. So this is the dilemma. And we're obviously somewhere sort of in the middle of this, where we're sort of here. We think we're sort of towards the end of that, and somewhere down the road is this thing, right? And a lot of sort of historical occurrences of this has occurred over years, if not decades. And in the case of things like the basic social democracy and stuff that I was referring to with the ancient Greek times, it took centuries to get right. Right. So this takes a long time. I think what's really sort of interesting for us is that the time scale that we've been talking about, driven by AI, is unclear. So this could actually happen very, very quickly. Right. So that's kind of one thing about it. And looking at this yesterday, as I was thinking through this, it also led me down the path of saying, well, this is how we actually end up getting walled gardens. Because some new technology gets invented, like the DDC, whatever, and then companies use it, and then they use it to their advantage. All companies would tend to try and do that, and that's how you create this sort of walled garden as being a way of controlling the use of that technology. So it's going to be governed in that sort of manner. Is sort of the way I think about that. I'd really love to get your everybody's thoughts on this sort of thesis. And there's another sort of aspect to this that I think is really important. Is the choice, right? We think about governance and being governed, and the opposite to that is chaos and anarchy. That's kind of the obvious way of sort of thinking about that. But I think that's overstepping this a bit, and in a way we're sort of used to chaos and anarchy, and I'm not sure we're afraid of it. But this is not really what the choice is. The choice is actually between being governed by the people by having open governance, or it's going to be governed by somebody else. And that this obviously takes me back to the walled garden. Either it's going to be controlled by a walled garden, or it's going to be controlled by government, big government, which I think most people are not in favor of that for pretty much anything, right? So, but that's really what's going on. So the obvious choice, the obvious sort of outcome that happens over and over again is that it gets controlled by one entity, aka a walled garden. And the last thing I kind of want to just sort of bring up is that what is really the scope of governance? Because it's not for everything. You don't govern everything out of a piece of technology because it'll never work. And it's really about governing if it impacts us humans. The governance is all about, how everybody understands how to access things and how to identify things and the roles of things. And you obviously sort of think of sort of social governance to do all of that, because we all have all of that, right? We all have access privileges to our homes and our offices, but not somebody else's office and all that, based on identities and roles and everything else. So that all exists. Governance for system relationships, very, very important, because when two entities do something, it needs to be predictable to ensure trust. Governance of data flows and the use of data, governance of risk, safety, and resiliency, that's really important. And obviously compliance, accountability, which leads to audits and other sort of good things of that nature. What it is not, and I feel very strongly about this, but I think this is pretty obvious again. Governance is not about governing the internal implementation of a product. It's not really what it's about. That is essentially between the vendor and his clients, his customers. Neither is it about functions of a product, because that's about what the product does. And obviously things like experimentation and descriptive sort of metadata are sort of not really that important. So this sort of difference of what is and what is really important. So the bottom line is this: it's not about governing every technical decision and everything that happens. The really, really important aspect of needing governance is really the boundaries, where the boundaries between different entities, between different technologies, between different domains, applications, etc. So this is how I'd like to sort of frame this this conversation, and I'd love to get some initial feedback from the group on this, whether this makes sense, and then we can open it up. And can I start with you?
Okay, I think the whole Monday Live journey has been, and the C4SB journey has been very useful. And I think what it's taught us is that there is safety, a natural governance that comes out of having lots of data. And we're all heading in that direction. And we're all heading in the direction of having that data open. So I think that's a positive step for governance. The other thing is our the duocracy, in the fact that we actually just physically go ahead and do stuff. We don't have to beg for forgiveness. We just go ahead and do it and see if we can create some interest in what our project is. Inside of that, we have some basic governance that we don't want to really do evil. So I think we kind of work around that. And naturally, when you're presenting your idea and you first stick it on GitHub, your belief is that this is something everybody's going to want. And for everybody to want it, they'll be worried about safety and all of these issues. So there's some sort of a self-governance kind of thing in there. The other thing that I think is beneficial is that once they get their prototype out, in the early stages, we kind of close that loop that you pointed out that can take years because we don't understand what we're doing. I actually believe that the duocracy, the folks that are actually doing it, have the greatest chance of seeing the problems that are going to crop up and just basically going ahead and adding governance to their product. And I kind of see it rather than it being a large governance thing that everything shall do this, it'll be my app or my post on GitHub shall do this, and it may do something different tomorrow because I got burned there. So the whole fact that it's sort of self-learning, I think, is important. I think that gives us some power. And looking back on some of the narrative that we've created over the last 4 years is probably useful. And that's probably enough said.
Muted until.
It's coming up to 6 years by the way, Ken.
6
But
years.
yeah, but who's counting? Simon, what's
I'm
your
a
thoughts
teenager though.
what's your thoughts on this sort of framing of governance?
Yeah, I'll start with the Collingridge Dilemma. I think that's still there, but as you pointed out, it started in the 80s or whenever that was. And it was kind of built around, I think, these legacy monolithic systems, right? And I think today it's moving a lot faster. So there's more opportunities, like you pointed out with AI, that we don't have to get stuck in this, we'll wait till governance appears before we do anything, but we can test it out, which is exactly what happened with the PAE process, right? If we look at that, they had silos that were essentially locked in because of that dilemma, because vendors that have the data locked in the utilities, as Rick mentioned. But we dissected it and got to the data and then enabled it in a test environment without waiting for kind of, well, what are the rules of this? We knew the rules, it was locked down, we're opening it up. So I think governance is not only for limiting, it's actually for enabling. So in PAE's case, if they were to put out governance in a scope of work or whatever, it says we are not going to work with vendors that don't open their data up in the future. And now the end result of the PA process is, yeah, and within a few minutes now they can push a button and start seeing the data flowing in. So that's an important example. And then the other one is like the article on the ice cream. The proof is in the ice cream with Keith. As we did it again, we basically said, okay, what are the pieces? We can do it quickly. I found over the years, and this is what we've been doing with BIMstorm, the more that you can actually get out there in a test environment with real data, with real people, you can start bumping into where the limitations are or where there are opportunities. And you immediately see if there's too much constraint on a system, you say, well, we can only get to 50% of the data. Let's just leave that behind. Let's get to the other part and not keep on banging on that door if we can't get into it, just like Keith does. And just like we did with PAE, actually, it's the exact same thing. If we get to the data, we can see it. So I think that cycling, and now with AI, like you mentioned, the cycling is faster, which actually means that we do need to kind of understand this dynamic of that dilemma. If we just kind of let it happen, it'll just happen. But if we're deliberate about it, then I think it'll move a lot faster. So that's just an important piece. And I've seen with our work with other owners like the community colleges and everything, we used the exact same thing. We didn't wait for permission. We just started doing it. Once you start seeing the real thing, the duocracy thing, people get excited and they find out where they link in and they can create value from it. One other, yeah, go ahead.
Is it fair for me to say that in a way, the process of doing the PAE work, which has been very interesting to watch, was sort of informed by the need for governance? Can I say that, or is that a stretch? Or
I think so, because they're locked in on, like Rick mentioned, they can't get to the utility data, which means the governance of how you get to the data, the silos that were intentionally locked down because of this Coolidge dilemma, systems are built around closed ways of doing things, which actually created the use case for PA saying, hey, we need to get to our data. How do we get to it? We have 10 different silos. Now, how do we dissect it to understand it? And then so next time we ask the right questions, which was the end result of this first phase. What do we ask next time as an owner or as a city or whatever, as a vendor, to be able to collaborate? So I strongly believe
with the implication that next time is sort of the start of sort of governed behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Governance being, if we're going to work with BIM, we need to be able to get the data. If we're going to work with a vendor that has a system in place, we need to ask, can we get to it? If we can't get to their data, we're not going to put that, whatever that pump that didn't talk to the network is. And
Right.
the name of it, I keep losing, right? That's an ongoing joke there, but leaving whatever it was.
Okay.
Well, if I can add a little bit of so the PAE principles see the need for governance of the process. They're not using the word governance necessarily. They're saying that it could be more.
They're engineers, right? That they know about rules and how to do things, right?
And specifications, which is actually in their title, because they are specifying engineers. So the ability to specify what the expectations are of the systems, so that they can get the outcomes that they want. It is a form of governance because they are saying we need all different systems. And now that they know what to request, they can request it. They clearly, 5 years ago, they didn't know exactly how to specify it and request it. And now going forward, they're kind of opening up and saying, well, yeah, so now if anybody wants to come participate in our new sort of ecosystem, is all they have to do is comply with these specifications or a structure of governance, if you will. And now this multi-vendor mix of products and capabilities all can be counted on to work in certain ways, can be identified if it's not working in the way that that's compliant with the architecture, and it can create innovation. So rather than being restrictive, it's actually a welcoming, it's a path forward to innovation and expanding. And if somebody wants to bring their product to this party, here's the way you bring your thing to the party. And that, so is that restrictive, or is that inviting innovation? And obviously the way
Yes,
they
that sounds like innovation and as sort of proto governance kind of thing.
And
if you
ISO 55000 actually has a good guidance on that too, because it's about continuous improvement as well as governance. So you're actually enabling it by continually improving it and not waiting. Oh, something got stuck here. You can adjust it because times change, like we see with AI now. The pace.
Tracy, you're next on my rotation here. What do you think of this sort of framing of governance?
Well, I think it was important to draw a clear distinction between innovation and allowing really intelligent tools to do their thing versus, I think some perceive this sometimes as we got to lock it down and put a governor on the technology. And I don't think that's what governance is about at all, right? We're looking for ways to create structure that actually accelerates use of tools and accelerates tools in their intelligence and what they can do. So I think that's a really important distinction, right? When it comes to our industry specifically.
I think
Getting into governance, from a government standpoint and security and all that, that's a whole other thing. But yeah.
Right.
Sorry,
I think
Ken,
one thing
go
we've
ahead.
done though is we've created the perception that walled gardens are bad and open is good. And I think if it's the 6 years, we've done a good job of that. And in Vegas, that became clear as most of the majors had already shifted and were basically promoting products that were open, and nobody was promoting a walled garden as I saw it. So I think that's a big change that's is good because it probably requires more governance, but at least it's a change in approach.
And it's just, I think it boils down to you shouldn't pick a fight that you can't win. So, I have an actually, we mentioned about the ice cream. That particular customer, their IT department was so locked down and so unreasonable. But you know what happened? We went around them. We laid our own 5G cellular infrastructure and we unplugged all their panels from the IT department because you were so unreasonable that you didn't want to work with us. And it went ahead and it happened anyway because the facility people own the panels, and the IT department only has governance or jurisdiction when the panels were plugged into their network. And I'm like, okay, problem solved. We just unplug your panels.
Yeah, you can air gap everything like that, right?
Well, yeah, I mean,
The thing
zero trust goes right to the cloud. But another thing,
yeah,
continuing with that, we also had problems getting the metering data from all of their buildings. We couldn't get it. So what do? Kimon, the building that you were tied to, there's a meter installed. I went and bought a $200 Timco meter and installed it myself for free as part of the engagement. So we're talking about this duocracy. We've been successful because we're able to go around roadblocks, no matter how they come occur. So if you don't want to give us the utility data, we'll just put our own shadow meter in. If you don't want us to connect to your IT network, fine, we'll just lay our own infrastructure. But the thing is that this stuff is not going to get stopped. It's not going to get stopped because the benefit is so huge. And so that's how we handle stuff.
So
We
what? So
give people a chance to be reasonable, and if they don't, they're just disintermediated.
so while you have the mic, could you comment on the framing that I've set out in terms of what governance is?
I think you nailed it. I mean, I think it's where it becomes oppressive, and it's not about dictating product features or implementation details. And so I think you nailed it. Like that's an overreach, and so I completely agree with that.
Tim,
And
what's your
here,
thoughts on this?
well, let me add in because I wasn't
Uh,
quite done with my
Sorry.
thought. If I could, so to Keith's point, we've had strategies to circumvent restrictions or roadblocks for quite a while, right? He just described a couple of classics. But the thing here, I think, in all of this is if people think that governance is going to protect their business part of this whole thing, I think that's a slippery slope because we're really talking about walled garden killers here, right?
Yes.
There is no walled garden that is going to be safe from AI. Eventually, it will learn its protocol, no matter how proprietary it is. It will find ways around that and find ways to communicate with it one way or another, unless they securely just lock it out altogether.
Yeah.
Right. So that I want to make sure that there's, when it comes to the walled garden aspect of it, I think this is the beginning of the end of walled gardens, no matter what we do from a standard standpoint.
Yep. An analogy I like to tell often is the tree trimmer. So we had this tree trimmer at my parents' house. They had this huge oak tree in their backyard, and it was leaning like 15 degrees over, and every year was leaning more and more. So me and my brothers would go to the tree trimmer and we say, "Man, we're gonna have to take this thing down." And tree trimmer goes, "No, no, no. This baby's fine. You don't need to take this tree down." Why? Because he charged us $600 a year in fees and maintenance on the tree. It was a perverse incentive to keep he didn't care about the fact that the tree might fall over and kill my mom and dad. And I'm like, my brothers were like, the tree trimmer says it's gonna be fine. I'm like, of course he's gonna say that. He's the tree trimmer. He's got his little wall here. And so we took the tree down and found out that half the root system was rotted out and the tree was imminent that it was gonna fall. So you gotta use good sound judgment and figure out why people are doing the things and recommending the things that they're doing.
Yeah.
Tim, what's your thoughts?
Just going back to your thesis there, I want to frame things in terms of the fact that we're coming out of a several hundred-year-old industry, which is the construction industry, which has very, very tight governance and liability rules. And if you look at the last 6 years or the last 30 years of our dialogue in building automation in this area, it's basically that there's a bad fit between what we do and that historical governance. So if you look at organizations like ASHRAE and how ASHRAE standards feed into building codes, that is the governance. How consulting engineers and architects design buildings, that is the governance of this industry. And what we found is that governance fails us again and again and again. And you can look at our different attempts at that summit, like the Division 2525 work, to try to educate people and reframe how to think about that. But if you look at it, really over the past 30 years of building automation, the governance of the construction industry has failed us because, once again, it's it's somewhere between a complex systems integration building and an engineered systems business. And those two things that circle has never been square. And I think that it really gets interesting now because you lay AI over the top of that and you're accelerating the change to something that's already broken. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, you left it there, but there's lots of questions from that.
Oh, we can dig into it if you like. I don't think I have answers.
Well, let me just finish go around the table. Steve, are you here? You're sort of here and not.
Yeah, I'm here. I made changes to my computer today, and
Okay.
I've had some challenges getting the
So
calendar up
do you
on
have?
my computer. So I'm working off my phone right now, which is
Okay.
fine. So just listening to everybody talk about all this, a couple things come to mind. One is, back when I was doing a lot with the NIST cybersecurity framework, when you read through the core principles around there, around knowing what your assets are, knowing whether you've got a way to recover from an incident, so that there's principles, key six, I think it's, as I recall, 6 different principal categories that they look to that provide essential guidance as opposed to mandates on how to do something. They would ask the questions: do you have an asset tracking or an asset? Do you know what your assets are? And do you have a way of tracking those assets, right? Do you have an incident management process in place or not? And then, should you have an incident, do you have a recovery process for responding to an incident that has occurred? So it was, they didn't attempt to tell you how to do it in each of these cases. They just said these are the governing principles upon which you should manage your cybersecurity risk.
And with the version 2 of the NIST cybersecurity framework, there's actually a governance thing that is applied to all of them, all of these concepts that you're talking about.
Well, that's see, I haven't caught up to the version 2, so right. So I'm just operating from, I guess, 5-year-old experience, and that's I guess Jim's point is, when efforts are made to lock things down, it invariably constrains actions, and then instead of facilitating good practices, it can often lead to practices that restrain an industry from evolving in a manner that's, to the best of everyone's ability, or the best advantage of that industry. So that's the big concern I have with. It's not disagreement over what should be included in the topic of governance. It's how to, if you will, specify it. And so what, going forward, since we're going to spend a fair amount of time on this, is, can we pick one thing, one of these governance principles, and talk about how that could be defined in such a way that we can all think, yeah, if we were done that way and it was applied to everybody's products that are being sold, that it would be could be understood easily and could be implemented in a way that doesn't restrict and doesn't slow the process down or constrain the process in such a way that innovation is now threatened.
A question, since Anto, you mentioned one of the tenets that you mentioned around governance was boundaries. So would that mean like applicable temperature ranges or limits,
No.
high and low limits?
Boundaries between, let's say, parties is probably the most generic terms. It's between different parties.
Okay.
Which means different domains, different vendors, different parts of the building.
Okay.
Where there are two things that have to connect in order to do something as part of the building.
Okay.
Those boundaries.
Have you guys heard of the sewing machine patent wars of late 1800s with Singer? This is before open source. They had the different methods for sewing machines to sew, and there's different manufacturers, and they started litigating each other because they had their own patents. Then they decided it's called pooled patents. Once they pooled their patents, then they moved forward. In other words, it was over constrained by the patent system to protect and govern their IP. But once they pooled their patents, it opened up new opportunities and new markets. So I think there's some parallels here. And this is way before open source came online, obviously.
That's called SEPs, standards essential patents these days, and it's a big thing. It's most of the patent that is relates to the phone, the technology that's in the phone, G5G and all that.
Yeah,
a lot of that is all SEP type patents.
Yeah,
It's
so it's
governed
actually
in
an
that way.
enabler, right? It's
Yeah.
governance that enables versus
Yeah.
if you over constrain it, then you lock into individual
Yeah.
IP pockets
Right.
that turn into thorny.
Rick, you get the last word. So you're on this thesis. I don't think I've asked you.
Yeah, I think the conversation around the how governance can work for innovation is really critical, and that's where we want to have de facto standards. And then another key thing that was said, though, I wanted to focus on was that where two things intersect is always where things need to be defined. If you stay to yourself and you're working in your own domain, rarely does there need to be governance. But it's like when you want to go work with a different silo or go work with a different technology, that's where um, there is required some standards, some guidance, some governance, if you will. If there's no debate about, like, when you all come to a four-way stop that the person to the right should go first, it doesn't even need to be written down. It barely needs to be
But that's still governance.
right.
Yeah.
But if there are people who disagree with who should go next at the four-way stop, that's when the community gets together and figures out how to write it down and then test for it. And so there's lots and lots of great examples of good governance. And I think where we're going with this is that because AI is going so fast, and this is where the conversation came up, AI is just moving 1,000 of these different conversations all to the town square or the four-way stop, all really rapidly. And that's a little bit uncomfortable for folks, I think, in that, but if we slow it down and just think about how that it's not a lot different from the four-way stop or the need for us, or do we need a traffic light at that intersection? It's just those conversations are just happening faster than what we're used to. But as this all speeds up, as AI forces the conversations faster and faster, I think just remembering the basics of what we've talked about today and about the fact that what we're looking for is efficiency and innovation. I mean, that's really core to how I see how governance will fit in over the next couple of chapters here.
And Roger made an interesting point. In the world of automation, governance has to be explicit. I totally agree. I think I would actually use a different word. I would use the word precision. Governance has to be all about being precise to the needs of whatever the circumstances are. So open it up. Who wants to add any more to this?
I also think there's a component of self-governance, though. It's survival. So if your AI runs amok and you do something wrong, you pay for that dearly. I mean, ask Uber. They tried to come out with an autonomous vehicle 5 years ago, and it ran over and killed a bicyclist who was walking their bike with a safety driver, by the way. who didn't intervene fast enough, got killed. That was the end of their full self-driving initiative. One death. So you pay the innovators in this arena pay very dearly for mistakes and not if they don't self-govern their own technology. It's brutal. So I'm not sure if there's so much of a need because the self-governance, like you're out of business. If you, I mean, I'm sure if it happens, if Tesla runs over somebody or a baby or something or kills them, God forbid, it's going to be over. And those are the stakes. Very severe.
Different levels of governance, Keith. I think Mike
Yeah.
put something about that there.
But there's a component of survival and self-governance that's got to be there, or you go
Yeah.
out of business. You cease to exist.
Yeah, with self-governance in a way is being governed by what happens to you as a vendor when you're self-governing. If you do stupid things, which is what you're saying, you're going to go out of business.
Yeah,
So
and you're
that
gonna
is a
pay for
form.
it.
That is a form of governance.
Sure.
Darwin's
Operating it.
theory at work right there, right?
There you go. Yep.
Yeah.
Really, the whole structure of our industry is put together around limiting that that risk and laying it off, distributing that risk according to contracts amongst different people, where insurance and other things exist to protect the engineers, the architects, the general contractors. It's a question of risk, and it's well understood how that risk is distributed in existing systems. But when you have AI coming in, that balance is completely stirred up. In fact, when any new technology comes in, it's stirred up. And that's one of the problems I think we've had as an industry.
Yeah, I think what's missing though is people don't understand how quickly AI has the ability to mitigate those risks
Right.
because of its superior performance.
But I think that the understanding of that, Keith, by everyone in the
Right.
ecosystem is the critical thing. And how fast can the people understand how AI is going to spread the risk as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
No,
we
we're
keep,
talking about governing full self-driving cars. I saw an article last week that look at the future. We're play this out over the next 5, 10 years. Your car might actually quiz you and make you take a driving test periodically to prove that you're sound enough to drive the car. Think about that. That's where this stuff is going, or it could go.
That's a form of self-governance.
Yeah, by the
Kind of.
machine. The shoe's on the other foot, though, Anto.
That's all right.
Sure. I completely believe that that's where this is going to go. Your car is going to test you, and you're going to have to pass a competency test in order to drive the car, for the car to allow
But
you.
if you think about it, you would have asked the car to test you. You're not doing. This is not happening
I
out
don't
of.
know. I don't know.
I'm not sure about that.
I'm not sure about that. Nope.
Well, I don't mean asking. You would have. Uh,
No,
you
it's
would have.
going to be imposed, like the breathalyzer.
I don't know if I've rented a car that has questioned my driving capabilities because I've been here in Boston, and it actually said that it seems that you're drowsy and you should pull over.
Yep. Yep.
Have you rented a car that's done that?
My Mercedes does that.
Yeah.
It makes it now it's just a suggestion, but it
Right.
says you need to pull over and rest.
Yeah.
How soon is it going to happen when it's going to mandatorily just shut off and pull by the side of the road?
But my point is, by the fact that you've bought a car that does that, you've given it permission.
I didn't know it did that.
And why are you not taking it back if it distresses you? Anyway,
It doesn't distress me. I'm just saying the shoe's going to be on the other foot. That's my prediction.
It'll
I
drive you to the
just
police
one
station.
quick one before we go. We're talking about AI, but it's AI that now has the power of all of this data. And that's what we had a lot of time before. We had no proof that things were needed to be governed. But now that we have the data, we can sit and look over, and AI can look over the data and say, you have a problem here. And I think that's what's propelling.
We put
And
ourselves up
we're
as
out of
human
time.
overlords right now, but yeah, it's going to quickly turn around. Trust me.
Okay, we're at the end of time. So this has been a very useful conversation, I believe. So we'll see how the rest of the month goes. So thank you everyone for for the conversation. Thanks everybody for being here. Bye bye all.
Right.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.